Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today we are going to be discussing my preliminary thoughts on Carnival Zombie 2nd Edition. If you want a game with absolutely agonizing decisions to be made, then Carnival Zombie is the game for you. This is a real nail biter of a game. At every junction in the game, multiple times per turn, there are decisions that you will have to make that you will absolutely agonize over. I'm not sure if Rado has done a run through of Carnival Zombie, but I can just imagine his brain going through having conniptions about this game. He would be like, "Oh, and then I can do this, and I can do this, and then I can do this, and then Jen would do this, but I could do this, but then we might want to do this and this, and there's and then crumbling to the floor, crying because of how agonizing each decision is in this game. Yeah, this is a game that is stressful. When I often get paralyzed when I'm thinking about all the things I can do in this game because I always want to do almost everything that is available, but you can only do a limited number of things. So in that sense, I think this game is really good. It is tense. It gives me a similar feeling to something like Space Hulk, even though it is a very, very different game than Space Hulk. But let's talk a little bit about what Carnival Zombie is. So in Carnival Zombie, you are playing as a group of 6 survivors. And in most of the game modes, you will always be playing 6 of these survivors. There is a special game mode in this 2nd edition where each player plays 1 survivor. And that does mean that if you are playing solo, you are lone wolfing it, and you will be picking 1 character to play with the entire game. I haven't played that game yet. I think it's called the Bridge of the Saints mode. And it's kind of like a special story mode that they added to this version. I'm really curious about that version and I want to play it. I just haven't yet. But in the game, you will be playing as 6 survivors. And those survivors are, if I can read the writing's a little hard to read, but we have Captain Spaventa, Arlecchino, Columbina, Brigella, Pantalone, and Medico della Pesta. And these are characters, and you are trying to escape the city of Venice. And the reason you're trying to escape the city of Venice is that, unbeknownst to mankind, the city of Venice has been built upon the back of this giant godlike Leviathan. And this Leviathan is waking up. It's starting to stir. And when it is stirring, it is causing the dead to rise and all of these monsters to invade Venice. And so you have 3 days to escape. And those 3 days are represented by these tickets here. And in order to escape during the day phase, you are going to be moving your group marker. You're going to be moving all 6 of your characters as a marker through the alleyways and waterways of Venice. And you have to get to one of these gold spaces by the end of the game. And each of these gold spaces triggers a certain in-game scenario. So you can escape by boat, you can escape over the Great Bridge, or you can escape via an airship. You can also escape by killing the Leviathan at Space 12. But to do that, you have to discover one of the characters' holy hand grenade. And I just want to read a little bit of the theming for that Space 12. I think this is so cool. So the game comes with an information sheet that gives you some details on all of the different spaces on the board. And Space 12 is the San Pantaleone Church. And this says, a small church unknown to most people. It was built more than a millennium ago above the rotting heart of the monster. A small well opens precisely above it. So if you have your holy bomb, your holy hand grenade, you can go to that church and you can have your final scenario in that church where there is a well that opens directly. It's like a portal that leads directly to the Leviathan's heart. And so you have to prime your holy hand grenade and toss it in that well in order to destroy the Leviathan. That is so cool. That is some really deep theming that I absolutely love. But during the day, you are going to be moving around, trying to navigate the alleyways and waterways of Venice. You are going to be making decisions about how you're going to be spending your time, because you only have 4 hours during each day to prepare for each night phase. And the things you can do during those hours are you can move from one space to the next. Some spaces take more time to move through, because as you are playing, at certain points, you're going to be drawing these randomization cards, and they're going to be dictating which spots on the board are sinking. Because as the Leviathan is waking up, the water levels are rising in Venice, and certain areas are sinking. And so those areas are going to be more difficult to move through. And then you can take a number of actions where you can create some barricades. These are wooden tokens here that you will use during the night phase to help fend off the onslaught of undead. You can search for items. Each of the characters in the game has his or her own item deck. And when you get to search, you get to draw a card from that character's item deck. This is super cool. I don't see a lot of games where each of the characters has their own item deck, but this is an example of that. And I think it's really cool because it does help create a theming, give the characters a little bit of personality, but it still keeps things simple. And you're cycling through those items, so different things are always coming up, and each game really does feel different because of how those items are randomized. And then you might also, when you are searching, you might also find these blue cubes, and these are survivor cubes. And those survivor cubes get added to the bag of undead. So in this bag, you have a whole bunch of different cubes that represent certain kinds of undead. You have these white cubes. These are going to be like zombie dogs. You have the green. These are your typical undead, your typical zombie infected. You have your gray. These are like really Goliaths, I think they're called. These are super strong zombies. And then you have purple, and these are called the Molochs. And these are just kind of a little stronger regular zombie there. But then also in the bag, you will add some blue tokens, which those are going to be your survivors. And you will add a few black tokens depending on, or black cubes, I should say, depending on the difficulty of the game. And the black cubes are paranoia. And these are just kind of a bad status effect that your character can get when they are drawn. But when you draw one of those survivor cubes, you will put it out on the board. And then at the end of the night phase, if you happen to meet certain conditions, you can rescue those survivors. And then those survivors can become a resource that you can use to sacrifice to prevent damage to one of your heroes. Or you can also use the survivors to distract the bosses so they can't use their superpowers. Really cool. This game has interesting time management. It has interesting resource management and interesting action management, because as you have a limited amount of time, you have to think very carefully about how you are going to use your actions, how you are going to use your resources in order to survive the night phase. And here we have on the board, we have the first of the night phase set up. And each night, you are going to be placing your characters in this middle refuge spot. And then from around the board, in different lanes, from different lanes in different quadrants, you are going to have your undead and your bosses moving in towards the center to attack you. So the night phase is like a standoff. It's a siege movie. This is Assault on Precinct 13. Or The Nest, or kind of like The Thing or something. You are holed up here, and you are in an area that you have moved to in Venice, and then you are going to be drawing your undead from the bag, and they are going to be placed out on the board, and they are going to be moving in towards you, and then you have to figure out how to survive the night based largely on how you prepared during the day. Because the more barricades you get set up, you can set up the barricades around in certain spots. The barricades act kind of like they prevent attacks, so they're kind of like extra hit points that your characters can use so they can defend better. But as zombies can move up into the empty spaces of the barricades. And then you also have all of your items. And the items have different ways to use them. And I think this is one of the most interesting parts about the game is how you use your items during the night. So at the nighttime, there is a beginning night phase. And some items you have to choose to use then. Those are usually powerful items that are one use. They usually last the whole night, but you have to choose to use it at the beginning of the night. You can't wait and use it as a reaction. You have to preemptively choose to use that item. And I think that is a really good choice to be made. And then at each night hour, you will have certain times that you can use items at the beginning of that night hour. And then you also have items that can be used at any time during that night hour. And again, it just makes for crucial decisions, very interesting decisions, and very agonizing decisions that you have to make. But after you have set up the night phase, then everything is going to be moving in, and you also have these bosses. And there are a number of different bosses in the game. I think there are 10, and each boss has different stats and a different power. I think one of the major criticisms I have about the game is the iconography on the boss powers. It really doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. If you guys watched my last video on Nanolith, that Kickstarter game that I did a preview for, I was able to read the iconography and decipher all of the cards really without even touching the manual. Very clear, very concise, very easy to read. I can look at these and I cannot make heads or tail of most of them. But luckily, it's not that big of an issue because on this really nice information sheet, this boss reference sheet, you have a very detailed listing of all of the boss's special powers. But I do wish that the iconography was a little more intuitive so you wouldn't have to constantly be looking at that sheet. But the bosses are going to come out and they're going to be stacked up in this row here. And the bosses are persistent until they die. So if you fail to kill a boss in one night, during the next day phase, you are going to be moving through Venice. And at night, those bosses will return with the damage that they have accumulated. And then you will continue to add new bosses. So it is imperative that you kill as many of the bosses as you can each night so that by the third night, you're not facing like 6 or 7 bosses in a row that are just totally going to devastate your party of characters. But each of the characters also has a built-in weapon. And the combat in this game is really simple. There's no randomization. There's no dice rolling. There's no card playing. It's just you shoot, you hit, you do damage, you remove cubes from the game. You don't have to roll dice. There's no checking. It's a hit. It does a certain number of hits. It does a certain number of wounds, and you have a certain range. That's it. Then each of the characters also has a special ability that is always triggered at night and a special ability that they can use as an action during the day. And they also have a number of damage that they can do in an assault action at night. And this is a melee action that they have to take when the enemies get into these barricade spaces. And then finally, at the end of the night, after you've lasted for 3 hours during the night, you are going to come across this dawn space. And at that time, you have to choose which direction your characters are going to escape. You can go north, east, south, or west. And that direction that you escape towards will also dictate the direction of your first movement on the Venice map during that first hour of the day. So during the game, during the night phase, while you are fighting, you want to think about how you're going to move out of that space the next day. And you want to be able to clear out a lane so you can make it through that direction without taking damage of a bunch of enemies that are still there. It's like this last gasp run, kind of like, at the end of like a Dawn or Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead, where they make their final like last gasp run to a truck or something like that. And they have to plan a route. They have to think about how they're going to clear out an avenue of escape. And that is really, really cool. The game is not complicated. I thought it was going to be a more complicated game. I think the complexity comes in the difficulty. This game is really hard and it is very stressful. While it is a game that plays very easily solo, even though you have to control 6 characters, I don't think it feels overwhelming because the characters are relatively simple. The complexity comes in the choice. The complexity comes in the number of options you have and how limited you are in choosing those options, because every option seems like a good option, but you can only choose one at a time. And the complexity it comes in the difficulty. The rule book is not the best, but it's also not the worst. I read through the rule book twice. I was pretty easy to understand the rules. There are a few kind of timing issues, a few little details, but you can get those answered pretty quickly on BGG. I didn't really have a difficulty learning the game. I am having a great difficulty in playing the game just because I find it so stressful. And even though it is a game that I think works really well solo, I mean, it excels, I think, at being a solo game. It is a game that I want to play more with a couple of other people, just so I can spread out the anxiety a little bit amongst some different people in a group. I do have to say that the components I think are beautiful. The map is gorgeous. I love that the all of the tokens, all of the chits are made with dark cardboard, like black cardboard. So they look really, really nice. I mean, man, these things, yeah, I love the way this game looks. One thing I failed to mention is each of the locations on the Venice map has a certain number of terrain, and some of the terrain goes in the inner circle, and that is beneficial terrain. And this terrain will help your characters, like an alleyway. It's kind of like it funnels the enemies into you, making that particular quadrant easier to defend against. Maybe you have this watchtower where you can have better range if you have this watchtower. But then some of the terrain is bad, where you might have some catacombs that make it easier for the enemies to infiltrate you, or maybe buildings that are high and so they block line of sight, or perhaps a pier that is more apt to appear at different water spaces, and they make it so that the enemies come a little closer to you quicker. And then also these manhole coverings where those will generate enemies directly from the manholes. So really cool use of limited terrain. And I can't believe I haven't mentioned this yet, but one of the coolest things about the game is this little board here. What a clever thing this is. So this is called the corpse pile, I think, the corpse pile token. When you kill an enemy, and when you kill a number of enemies, you pick up all of those cubes that you have killed, and you have to drop them on this little board. The rules are very simple. They have to be dropped. It can be from any height, in any way that you want, but it has to be a drop. If any of the cubes fall off this token, fall off this little board, they immediately get placed back onto the board because they have come back to life. They are undead. So as you are playing, you are going to be dropping more and more of these every turn. Every time you kill things, you will be dropping these onto this board, and you have to start thinking carefully about how you are going to be dropping these, because eventually, you're going to be dropping them on top of each other, and things will start pushing off. Super, super fun. This little light dexterity game adds so much tension and so much fun to this game. And because of this little element here, this is like the main reason why I think this game will really shine in a group environment, because of the fun, the tension, and the laughter that this will generate. I was watching the Board Game Geek, the BGG group that plays games, sort of game night. I was watching their play of the first edition of Carnival Zombie, and every time they interacted with this little element here, they had so much fun, so much joy, so much tension on their faces as the people were dropping these and trying to keep everything piled together in this corpse pile. But when you reach one of those end spaces, then you will trigger one of the end game scenarios. And each one of those scenarios has its own page here that's going to give you your setup instructions and what you have to do in order to win this end game scenario. I've only been to one of these so far, and it was the bridge, and I died. And this game, I think I'm going to try to head towards a boat and see how that works. But you have an airship finale, you have a boat finale, a freedom bridge finale, and a holy bomb finale. And then if you fail to make it to any of the gold spaces by the end of the third night, then you have this finale, which is a night without dawn. And this is kind of a last gasp stand against the Leviathan and its minions. In addition to that, each one of these final finales can be played as a standalone scenario. And then you also have a number of different scenarios that you can play. And that is called Plague in Venice, Just a Matter of Time, Dr. Guarini's Experiments, and No Rest, No Peace. Now, what's interesting about Dr. Guarini's Experiments, this scenario actually has a dexterity minigame where you are trying to kill things and then stack them in certain combinations. And so it kind of extends the dexterity part of the game a little bit more. So the main mode is called a campaign mode. It's not really, I think it shouldn't really be called a campaign mode. It's just the normal mode of the game where you are moving through Venice trying to reach a finale. And then the scenarios are where the game changes up a little bit. And then there is finally that Bridge of the Saints scenario, which is represented by this card here. I believe it's called Bridge of the Saints, the Path of the Saints. You have all of your rules for the Path of the Saints here. You can play with one character per player, so you can play a true solo lone wolf mode with this. And there are various places where you can kind of like level up your character to make them more powerful. In this mode, your survivors are out there with you, and the survivors, the little blue cubes, they are helping you fight. They are helping you survive. And then you have these pathways here, which you're going to be moving a token along these pathways. And at certain spots, you can do certain things, such as summoning other characters into the game to help you at certain points. This mode here sounds really cool, and it is definitely going to be the mode that I play next. But yeah, I like this game. I am so happy that I finally have it. I've been wanting Carnival Zombie for a really long time. I was super happy when it finally came out on Kickstarter for the second edition. And then I waited patiently as I saw like the delay. This game was delayed so much. I kind of lost faith in it that it was ever going to get delivered, but it ended up getting delivered. And I don't think I could be happier with the package. Maybe if the rules were a little bit better, or the iconography on the boss cards was better, was more intuitive, I think I would be probably a little happier. But as it is, I'm super stoked for Carnival Zombie. And I'm hoping that the game hits retail and does well. I think this game is going to appeal to a lot of players. It's going to appeal to players like me who want a really highly thematic game. But I also think it will appeal to players who want something a little more tactical, a little with crunchier decisions to be made. And one of the things that is great about this game is it's super fast to set up, super fast to put away. It's not very fiddly. There aren't a ton of moving pieces and aren't a ton of components. It's a relatively simple game to get to the table, but it is a complex game to learn. It is a complex game to master and to get good at. And it's a game that I kind of want to get good at because I want to feel like I'm in control of this situation. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at Carnival Zombie. I do recommend it. Hopefully it hits retail so people who missed the Kickstarter can check it out. So all right, guys, well, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.